James Melendez, James All About Business. Today's topic, a very important one, is servant leadership. Serving to lead and leading to serve. Stay tuned and I'll tell you all about the subject matter. So this is important because Robert Greenleaf, who wrote the book, which is Servant Leadership, and I have that book right here. It is something that I very much appreciated. I learned this in graduate school. Robert Greenleaf spent nearly 40 years, and a large part of that time he was a director of management development. So, he thought a lot about this. He was at a very large company, one that was very interested in developing their managers. So how to create a development program so that managers were leading their direct reports in a way that was positive, that kept from the company losing talent, so that allowed employees to stay. They enjoyed the company, they enjoyed the environment, they enjoyed the culture. So Robert Greenleaf wrote a book, The Journey to the East by Herman Heise. He really gels this together in terms of his experience at AT&T, along with his experience in terms of what Herman Heise wrote about. Now, when you whittle down and when you look at the centering of his topic, Robert Greenleaf's topic, it is a servant leader places the needs of the employee first, helps employees to develop, and creates the optimum performance platform. Very important. He says, and this is quoted many times, I serve because I am the leader. I am the leader because I serve. That's a very different format than we have today in 2020, where nobody or most companies, managers wouldn't say that. They might say something like, I'm the manager because I'm the most qualified. I'm the manager because I'm the best to lead. Well, that doesn't talk about your employees. That doesn't talk about why you're doing what you're doing, and really getting that buy-in and getting that attribute from your employees and getting that connection, that strong bond and link. About servant leadership in a for-profit setting, it's really thought of as just for the nonprofit world, which it is not. If you read the book, which I definitely recommend if you're interested in servant leadership, he talks about other institutions such as education, government, even churches. He talks about, of course, for-profit. He also talks about trustees of an organization. So I read Servant Leadership several times, and it was one where I was thinking, well, let's look at the data out there. What does it look like? What do the surveys have to say? Will it be hard to find? It was easy to find this information about managers and relationship to their employees. So this is not a rosy picture by any stretch. It is something that should be alarming to any executive at a company, any board of directors. It should be really disconcerting to people managers, people who manage people at an organization. What matters here is what people say about their managers, their direct manager. I won't read each of these, but they are very disconcerting, some more than others. 65%, two-thirds, said they take a new boss versus a pay raise. That's a pretty risky proposition given this environment. Imagine your next boss being similar to your last boss. And then 58% said they have left the job because of their manager. 1/3 of the managers do not know how to lead, according to another survey. $360 billion is spent on bad bosses, bad managers. $1 trillion cost to the economy, U.S. economy alone. And in an organization with, say, 100 employees, it's about $2.6 million cost to replace employees who have left the organization. So that turnover is very, very pricey, very expensive. And a lot of people have some very cynical views about turnover in an organization. A lot of people in their cultural milieu, so to speak, think about people who turn over, and that is, companies want that. Companies want that to hire people at a lower wage, at a lower salary. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because the turnover rate is really high. It's about 26.3%, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a very large number, 1 out of 4 people on an annual turnover basis. So it does cost companies to replace those employees. So the learning curve is steep in a significant number of companies. And that really is a cost to the enterprise. It's something that has a lag time. And so if you have that turnover on a 4-yearly basis, you've turned over 100%. That's a pretty high number. And so I'm going to go on and just finish this out by saying 53% of employees experience harassment, and they were so afraid of a hostile environment, they did not report that behavior or that activity. 1 out of 2 people. And 76% say their managers are toxic. All these are very disconcerting. So if you think your organization is doing well, it is probably not. You can look at engagement surveys time and time again and really delving into it. probing into it as an executive should be at a company to understand where people are coming from. I worked at one organization and I instituted every single year the engagement survey. So I would say to employees that would ask me a question or a thought about the survey, I would say, just give your assessment. It is confidential. And many employees don't believe that. So they would just respond to the survey the way they felt the company expected them to. They were afraid to respond, to give truthful and honest feedback, because they thought they would be fired or there would be something disadvantageous to that particular person if they responded in a way that was actually truthful. Now, I captured this particular image because it is a hand wrestling match. Now, this is really representing an employee to their manager. Think about this. Now, if your manager isn't really going to be, servant leader, what are they doing? They may be competing against you. If you have a servant leadership proposition, that is, that person is going to help you to succeed and not the other way around. If you're in a scenario where your manager is competing against you, who's going to win that match? Not you, not me, unless I'm the manager. And I think this needs to change in many companies today. Here's some servant leadership positions that I think are essential to think about. It's to think about and place managers and employees in a situation that it's cooperation over competition. It's influence over control, guidance over ambivalence. But the last one is important, which is helping employees to exceed expectation over failing or partially meeting expectation or even demotion. So in one organization, I was a chief of staff. I noted that leadership team year over year gave about a 40% does not meet expectation or partially meets expectation to their entire workforce. That's a significant number. So the HR business representative, I thought for sure, would call that out at a specific time. Maybe not the first year, maybe the second year. No. Third year? No. If the organization was working in a 40% partially meets or does not meet expectation for their employees, wouldn't that come out somewhere? And so, not much was done with that. Nobody did anything with that. The leader didn't recognize that particular requirement. But underneath it all, the employees were seething, especially those people that were, in that 40% range. And they tended to be in that range year over year. The servant leadership position was not utilized, was not honored, was not even really taken into account. So people felt stuck. They felt they couldn't go to another organization in the company. And then there was another part where the managers really weren't seeking to help their team members, their employees, their direct reports to do better, to help them to succeed. So it was really unfortunate in that situation because that 40% were really unhappy. They didn't want to be in that organization. And also the managers didn't feel any responsibility to bring up their particular team members to be at a meets expectation, which I suspect many of those individuals were. Again, it goes back to if it was a really performing individual, that organization would have felt that repercussion of, say, that 40% ratio. So our current state is a spectrum. And I'm not going to read each of these, but I think they're really talking about where we are and how we got in this culture today. It's, HR is a rubber stamp. It's not pushing back or even probing on particular responses that the leadership team gives to them. So executive management not making the connections of non-servant leadership positions. That is the mindsets. Now, managers are always right. Well, are they? So that's another defining feature. And so, there's another, current state belief, which is not our organization. Maybe that's another partner organization within our larger company, but it's not us. So I think, the future state is, think about these terms. Think about what it sounds like. Wouldn't you love to hear this more often from your employees? I am valued. I recommend my employer. I appreciate the transparency of my organization. I feel my reviews are fair. This is a genuine culture. So creating the future state is to create the platform. It's to create that environment. It's to do so that's intentional. Things are not going to get done, and you're not going to have the servant leadership culture unless you create it, unless you have the desire to create that and have the intention to do so. You have to have an endorsement. You need a written plan. You also have to look at this in terms of executing to the plan. Additionally, you have to do training that is for the employee base as well as the management team. And then you get to culture. That's important. So when I think of culture, I think of servant leadership culture. I think of culture as something that's really significant. Culture is really something that's important. It's not just a special event. It's about the way things are done. It's about the way you get things completed. And then this has to be sustained. So oftentimes, this particular organizational development tool lives not necessarily where it should live, in my opinion. It lives in HR organizations. I think that's a bias. I think it really should live in, say, continuous improvement organizations, and that is that it can be sustained. There's a way of getting there. It can be monitored, and that's one way of informing the leadership team of things that need to occur and change. And definitely this is in partnership with the HR community, so they're aware of these particular requirements, needs, feelings of the organization. Now I'm doing a roll call of servant leadership language, and I'm just going to read a few of these. It's about creating an environment of meaning and listening. It's a long-term investment in your employees as well as your management team. It's also looking at us in terms of consensus, creating empathy, a feeling. It's creating a platform for trust. It's also creating a sense of renewal, renewing this on a yearly basis, continuous basis. So a servant leadership culture is a second nature. You don't think about it, you execute. You do this. You are the leader because you serve, and you serve because you are the leader. And that's a different position. As an individual contributor, you're thinking about your role, but you're also contributing to your manager. It doesn't mean that the servant leader is someone who doesn't do their job. It doesn't mean someone who's not a strong manager. It doesn't mean that that person can't give constructive feedback to their employee. It definitely means all of that, but it also gives a different meaning, a different language, a different way of having a relationship with your employee. If you have these particular leadership language characteristics and qualities, you will get to culture, but you have to have an intentional plan and roadmap to get there. I would be very excited to help you and your organization to implement a servant leadership platform. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching today. Again, questions and comments you can list there, and also you can send a message to me, and I'm happy to talk to you directly about servant leadership. Stay tuned for more business content to come. I do appreciate it. Thank you.